Welcome back to Attack 404. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at using audit control and AuditD to find web shells and to see if our web applications are being screwed with. On top of that, we'll be taking a look at some of the incident response process and how we can start detecting if in the event there's someone or something in or around our system that we should be aware of. So the previous example, we were basically talking about how we could find out if someone or something is on the box. One of the mentions that I am going to make is you can do some of your investigation from the logs inside of the log directory and through Apache. And that will look something like this. We did code a different PHP shell because the other server is being a diva, and I don't have the patience to play around to get it to work. So, if we go through the access log, one of the things you're going to want to take note on is if in the event you're seeing system commands pop up in and around your uniform resource indicators or parameters in your web application or in the URL themselves. If you do see things like this and you start to see things like uname, then it could indicate that someone's trying to probe the server or it's responding and you should be looking into it. This won't fully tell the full story, even if we take netcat and copy it into this directory, and then we do an ls, so we just browse the directory. There should be an instance of netcat somewhere on the box, unless that's the other one. I'll show you what that looks like when we do get netcat on the machine and how to listen for it, but this is going to give you some of the picture, not all of it. So, one thing that we're going to do in order to start with audit daemon and audit control is we're going to want to install AuditD. In order to do so, again, I'm on the Debian based box, so we'll issue this command. And you'll see mine says it's the newest version. If you want to install it without hitting the yes, you could do it that way. The audit control information is located in Etsy Audit. And you're going to have all your audit rules in Audit Rules. And then you'll also be able to edit inside Rules D. There should be audit.rules again. And you can see in this example, we've made 4 edits that basically cover 2 architectures. So architecture B64 is obviously 64-bit, and B32 is 32-bit. In this instance, we're looking for anything that's got a socket connect, or makes a connection, or accesses a socket. The next one we're looking for is execution. If anything is executed in the system, we want to know. So once these rules are applied, we can issue either or of the commands I'm going to show you now. And that'll restart audit daemon. The other way we could do it is this way. And that'll restart it as well. One thing we will point out is if you have issues applying the rules in rules.d, you could apply them directly in the audit.rules file that we have here. And another thing that we want to point out is if you're running the command outside of doing it in the rules file, you will need to apply auditctl and then press enter, and you can see that the rule's already there, so there's no point in the application adding it again. And then of course any edit that you make, you're going to want to restart it. Inside the audit.rules file, you don't need to apply the auditctl. It already knows that. So let's take a look at what audit actually does. So let's SSH back into that box. Before we even go any further, we do want to point out that all your audits and the audit events will be in var log audit.log. One other thing that we want to point out is when you are doing auditing on the remote end, you do want to pass this into a CM, and we'll explain why later on, not only for capturing data, but just if in the event that someone erases that audit log. So we started an audit, tail on audit, and what we're going to do is we're going to remote into the box. If you see the Wazoo, if I'm saying that wrong, too bad, log collected, that's the heartbeat that we have that's connected to our quote-unquote CM. So let's SSH into that box. And you'll see a bunch of stuff happen. And inside this, you have an execute. And it put us in the current working directory of the user that we are in. And if we issue this again, you'll see it's gonna, it should be updating with the commands that we're issuing. Here we go. So now you can see we've done a which command, and you see it's been bash, and there should be inside of the log the parameters that we specified. And some of this is in fact on the article that we've written for it. So I don't want to focus on this too much. So what we are going to do is we'll start taking a look at what it looks like when an attacker starts to go through our environment. You can see we have the clear that we've done. If we issue which nmap, you'll see we have nmap installed. And if we go through the log, there it is. So we executed the command for which, and then the parameter we specified was nmap. So now, let's say we're going to operate with just the permissions that we have now. We want to see other systems on the box. And then I'm going to break it. So you see socket address. This is audit CTL or audit daemon displaying to the user or the CM and writing to the log that someone or something is opening sockets. Now, if you start to see nmap or any other tools that you normally wouldn't have in the environment starting to do this, this should automatically raise red flags and an investigation should automatically be kicked off. So with that said, what I will do is I'm going to open up another shell. And I'm going to look for a case insensitivity for netcat. Netcat is on the box. I'm going to spawn a Python web server. So now we're going to start the HTTP server, and then once we start the server, we're going to transfer over netcat with the following command. And if all goes well, we can either back out and take a look at what's in the directory, which this thing loves to go wild and download stuff, or what we could do is we could use the vuln application and we could issue an ls, and we see a bunch of netcats because Safari, hey, why not? The more the merrier, right? So now that we have that installed, what we're going to do is I'm going to clean things up a bit because I don't like my directories being that messy. Yay. So now what we're going to end up doing is we are going to listen on the local host because we already transferred our malicious file over. So what we're going to do is we're going to issue the NC and L, we'll do 666. Keep in mind, if you are on a Linux box, I am on a Mac. In Linux, it's going to be an LVP and then your port number. In my case, it's just going to be NL and 666. Now we're listening. Actually, let's do NLV 666. So now we are going to execute our netcat. And then we'll do is we'll put 10.0.1.160 in, and then we'll do the port 666, and then we will command shovel with the E user bin bash. But before we do that, let's grab, come on now, let's grab our other shell, and we're going to move this to the top. Let's merge all the windows again. Put this bad boy back up here. This way you can see exactly what the hell is going on. And then I'll issue this command here. If we jet back up, let's drag this down a little bit more so we can see what the hell we're doing. Here we go. Okay. And there's a few things I want to point out here. So the first thing that we are going to look at is syscall execve. We see it's from www data. We also see that it is being run from, if we go up, sorry, we see practically the full command. So we see it's being run from the hack directory that's in our HTML folder. We also see it's calling netcat. And then as we go on, we see the full command. So I'll explain this portion here. So when an execution begins, it's going to log the arguments, A meaning the arguments. So what we see is that the first argument, or argument 0, because in programming everything starts at 0, we see netcat is being executed, with argument 1 being our first indicator of compromise, which is an IP address. Then we see our quote-unquote second indicator of compromise, which is a port. And then we also see a command option, and we also see another command that's going out to bash. In a weird world, we'll pretend we don't know what's going on, but we know that this is command shoveling. Soon after that, the syscall executes. If we go down, we should see a socket open. And here we are. And then once the socket is open, we see the current working directory where the socket was open is in fact the hack directory. So if we continue down this rabbit hole, let's move this up. We'll go all the way down to the bottom. I want to break this out and pop that there. And I do want to show you what netcat and audit will look like. So you see every time we type a command, something basically ends up flooding the screen down the bottom, and we know that it's clear. So let's say we want to do an nmap scan. I showed you that before, but for the hell of it, we'll do it again. And you'll see the screen flood. I'm probably going to do an edit here, so hang tight. And you actually see the ports that it's opening and coming up with. Now, if we pivot to the box itself in a form of an incident response process, we'll go back down to our root terminal on the remote box. And what we're going to do is we're kind of going to start looking for what an attacker may have done. So the logs that we're going to be interested in are going to be, so we're going to be interested in the access log and preserving access to that. So we want to capture a screenshot and an MD5 sum of the screenshot from when we launch our investigation. So that would be like MD5 sum, and then it would be access.log, and we get a screenshot of that, and then we bring that file over. The next thing that we're going to want to look through and do the same thing with is going to be the audit directory. Hey. And we're going to want to do an MD5 sum on this, get a picture of that, and then we'll take that audit log out. We could see and use the access log in Apache. We could use the access log in Apache to stop to look at commands that were executed using grep. And then you'll see netcat was executed. Sometimes things might not be what they seem, and you might have URL encoding that you might have to decode, or base 64. If you start to see base 64 encoding, something's wrong with that. Another thing on the box that we'd want to do is take a look at anything netstat related. So we still see that we have a shell going on. So if we get on the box and we do that netstat with the command given, we do see that wget is still active, and I'm going to shrink this just a little bit just so I could get the text to wrap in a way that's going to make sense for what I'm going to be showing you. Let's go a little bit bigger. That should be it. Okay, so things that we should explain. So we see that there's an outgoing connection to this wonderful port here. We also see that going back to 160, we have some multiplex ports here. I'm not going to discuss what multiplexing is. And we should also have an active 80 back to 160. Oh, 8,000. Surprised that's still in there, which is from wget. So, what else can we do on the incident response side? Because we see some anomalies, both in audit and access log. This could be the potential that a shell's been shoveled or something's going on. So, what I will point out is this is your PID. The PID is the process ID, and in incident response we can issue PSAX, and then we can grep out the PID, and you see that it goes back to bash. We can also check to see in the proc directory if that PID exists, and it does because we're in the directory. We can also issue an LS. This at a later time, I will show you how to navigate the proc directory in case there's no binary or executable that we could leverage. We could potentially recover it from the PID directory. So to keep things simple, we'll go back to the hack directory, and we'll also run another, let's do ANO for netstat. See if we get anything else. So in the incident response portion, we already know we have indicators of compromise, and that being that it's a 10.0.1.160 address. We also know that it's port 666. So if we want to narrow this down, there's some commands that we could do with netstat, grep, and egrep. So the first one we'll take a look at is going to be egrep, because it's the extended grep, and we can put in more than one IOC to see if that is returned, and we could do it like this. So let me clarify with the command netstat tunlp. This will give us whatever is listening on the local host. So in this case, because we have connected back, we don't see any of the commands or ports that are open that reference 666, and we also don't see anything that references the 160 address. So even if we've taken the data from TUNLP and we just did 10.0.1.160, nothing's going to return, even if we move egrep. So the next step is going to be sorry, that's my neighbor's annoying dog. So now you see you kind of get a little bit more data back. So if we come back out, because we want to kind of see what's going on, let's do one more. I'll do two more. I will make it a little bit bigger. That should be it. So what this is showing us is that 10.0.1.160 is being called back to 666. There is a connection that is established on this PID through bash. We also see that we are SSH'd in because we are acting as the attacker and the defender. So you could ignore anything that's over SSH. We could pretend that that doesn't exist. Or you could consider it that it exists, considering that we are on the box and we're doing an incident response on it. So as referenced before, even if we do a PSAX and we do a grep, you'll see that that does exist. And if we do an LS and proc, you'll see that that directory also exists. Now you could take this a step further by doing incident response within the proc directory and the PID number, but that's out of scope for this video, and we'll be discussing that in a later time. So with that, what I was going to show is if we go back to audit and we do a grep on 666, let's do 5 lines before and let's do 5 lines after the instance that we find. And it would be fantastic if I put in a file name. Okay, so we see 666. Use a grep. Let's go. We might have to screw with this a little bit more. If we're not getting what we want, so what we should do is look for our indicator. 160 is our indicator. If I mentioned another IP address before in the netstat, it's the 160 address that we're gunning for, because that was the connection. Okay, so here's we connected on port 8000. There should be, okay, that's port 80, where we probably issued the, okay, so here's where Nmap got executed. I feel like the guy on the Jerky Boys. I can't see, goddamn you. Shout out to Angie, because now I see why she wants everything colored. And I never realized this until now. Let's not get crazy with this. Let's just do 160 and see what comes back. Okay, so here's where we get netcat. Alright, perfect. This is kind of what I'm looking for. So on this line, let's get a little crazy, and I want to do this. So we got that. I want to search for this, but I want to do after 5 lines, and I want to do before 5 lines, because I want to see, what I want to show you is where the execution is, because we have to play quote-unquote dumb in order to make this almost a real-world example. Okay, so we see that the syscall, okay, execcbe, that's perfect. Ah, beautiful. So now we see the current working directory for all this action is happening from var www html. If we play a little brain dead, because maybe we don't know, maybe we do know, we're looking for a refresher, maybe we just don't see it, because sometimes what ends up happening is in the heat of everything going on, you will probably miss something during an incident response. It's okay. And if your manager doesn't understand that, he sucks at being the manager, or she. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that we have We're not the attacker at this point. We're going to pretend that we don't know hack exists. We're going to pretend that we didn't see the executing directory from where everything was happening was in hack. And we're going to learn something new. So we're going to issue a find command, period, because we want to be in the current folder for HTML. We're going to do a type, and then we're going to do an F for file. If we want to get crazy, we can do D for directory as well. We're going to do M time, and then we're going to do, let's say, minus 4 days. And we let it rip. So we see the hack directory has appeared within the last 4 days, and so has index.html. Let's go a little bit further. Alright. So we do 10 days. This would be a modified time. So what's been modified was netcat hack netcat vuln php index.html. One thing that I will point out is when you do an incident response, if something happens today, try to go back 30, 60, 90 days. It'll be a bigger picture, and you'll see a lot of stuff. So now, if we have all of this, let's say we want to modify this just to files. We don't really care about directories. So we see netcat has been put in 2 different places. We could do an exec md5 sum. Ooh. I think it's like that. Alright. And what this will basically do is we're telling it to execute md5 sum against the files that are found, return the sum and where they are. This is great if you're dealing with multiple things going on, because you could just pipe this to an output file, grab this really quick, and then later on you could start piping this through into VirusTotal when we start looking at how to identify threats really quickly if they've been seen before. You could even get a little bit crazy if you need to help identify what a file is, because in most cases you want to know the file type, so you can do it with the file command, and that'll give you some of that. And then at this point, it'll basically come down to what you do with the incident response portion. Gather that data, get it off the box, firewall it, rebuild it, and however that goes. This is going to wrap up the audit control and AuditD video. If you liked it and you enjoyed the content, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you need to reach out, please do so. You could also find the documentation for the write-up attached in the description below.